All right, so tonight we are looking at two stories, the healing of the centurion's servant, and then the man that was lying at the pool at Bethsaida. And so those will be our two stories. I want to apologize so this is what I intended on the handout, which was a two-sider. And my computer and the printer didn't talk well, and so I printed a lot of pages. So there are two different discussion sheets that we'll access here in just a bit, but I did want to let you know about that. So we're going to study these two miracles tonight, and then next week, two more. We'll be on a break on the 23rd. We'll have two more special programs on the 30th. The 7th will be our Christmas sing-along night, and you'll want to be here for that for sure. But we've got one more good week with miracles next week. Just a reminder about what we've agreed that miracles are, and what we're doing, which is we're not just talking about the specifics of the details that were in the miracle, but we're also looking for meaning inside it, right? Each week, something we can understand. And so the healing of the centurion's servant appears in 3 of the Gospels, not in Mark. Many of the miracles that we've been reading from Mark, but tonight we're going to look at Matthew 8 and read this story. So I'll read this for us tonight. When he entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, appealing to him and saying, "Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed in terrible distress." He said to him, "I will come and cure him." The centurion answered, "Lord, I'm not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only speak the word, and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority with soldiers under me, and I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my slave, 'Do this,' and the slave does it." When Jesus heard him, he was amazed and said to those who followed him, "Truly I tell you, in no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west and will eat with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the heirs of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." And to the centurion, Jesus said, "Go, let it be done for you according to your faith." And the servant was healed in that hour. So a lot of ink has been spilled on this miracle. There are similarities between the Syrophoenician woman's daughter and this miracle in Mark, or the Canaanite woman miracle in Matthew. In each case, you've got a Gentile approaching Jesus asking for healing, right? And so you've got an advocate. It's not someone who's present that he can touch, right? That he can use the spittle that we've been talking about and physically touch. But these are emissaries, for lack of a better word. They are here, and their beloved person is not present. And Jesus, as a Jew, shows some reluctance in both these stories to respond to these requests, but the Gentile shows so much humility, so much faith, that in both cases Jesus fulfills the healing and praises their faith, right? And so the centurion seems, in fact, almost more hesitant than Jesus. I mean, what was his response? Jesus says, "Let's go to your house." And he's like, I'm not worthy. It's almost like, I forget the movie, We're Not Worthy, We're Not Worthy. He doesn't see himself as someone that can welcome Jesus into his house, but shows a remarkable degree of faith in Jesus in several respects. He assumes that Jesus is quite able to perform a healing at a distance simply by speaking. A word is all it takes. And that kind of deep faith is pretty intense. Secondly, makes a very significant comparison between his own authority and that Jesus possesses over the power of darkness and sickness. If you remember those phrases, he uses the example of his power over his own slave, but also over soldiers that are under his command. And says, you have that kind of power, I know it. And all you have to do is speak. So this centurion instinctively recognizes Jesus' authority as the stronger one who's able to bind the evil powers and perhaps even this divine authority. Again, like the Syrophoenician woman, he gives language that is familiar, right? The way the Greek unfolds is kind of colloquial. It's calling him sir, but also this idea that it might carry some connection to a realization of more than just being someone you might call sir. It had another connotation of this recognition of kind of divine lordship, okay, and even higher status. And so this hatred of the occupation that's going on here is readily available, right? I mean, Matthew is a distinctly Jewish story. He's a distinctly Jewish storyteller. He's writing to a Jewish audience. And so this Gentile, not only is he a Gentile, but he's also what? A Roman soldier. That's a terrible pairing here, right? They're not buds. And that's a stark contrast. So, and as in so many miracle stories, the greater healing to which the story points isn't just this healing of this servant, but it's also this removal of a barrier, right? This is same story almost over and over, but it's this sense that even this soldier, even this Roman, even this Gentile who's got strike after strike after strike, is someone who can be included, right? Not excluded or despised. And so, just like the Magi begins in Matthew's gospel, they're anticipatory, right? They're telling of what's to come. They point ahead to the Gentile mission after Jesus' resurrection. At the same time, they underscore this irony that this Jewish Messiah found rejection among his own people, would find faith and welcome among foreigners. Right? It's this image that we've talked about already, that God's original intent was to start with the Jews. Right? That's the story of the Old Testament over and over again. And Jesus' original intent, I think, was there as well, but that circle just got larger. The centurion represents not only the Gentiles, but also this occupying army that has been subjugating people in such a way, we can't imagine it. It's hard for us to imagine what those folks went through. Being told what to do and not being able to, you just didn't have the freedom to do what you wanted to do. It's something that's unimaginable for us in some ways, right? And so there is this hatred that exists. And even from the time of Daniel onwards, military forces occupying Israel had been viewed theologically as this counterpart of Satan, right? I mean, there were God's people, God's chosen, and then all the occupiers. And those are the good and the bad in the story. And it's no different here. The Roman Empire is the earthly manifestation of this celestial power that opposes God and opposes what God wants. But the faith of the centurion almost ushers in this eschatological inclusion, right? He opens the door, this faith opens the door for inclusion that didn't exist before. And so you've got this image of someone who should be hated, but is embraced and redeemed in Christ. So, what I'd like for you to do, you've got two sheets. One with the Matthew 8 text and the other with the John text. What I'd like for you to do around your tables is just work through the Matthew 8 questions, and then I'm going to loop us around in about 5 or 8 minutes, or until it looks like everybody's done. But work through the story and answer these questions around the table. I'll give you 5 to 8 minutes. All right. So a few things I want us to just think about as a group. This idea that the centurion is someone who would stick out like a sore thumb in the middle of this arena, right? This centurion is going to represent the outsider, a foreigner, an oppressor, maybe even worse. Who are some people in our world today, your world today, who might feel like that? Who's someone we might villainize? We might say, oh. Is there anybody? Who would we villainize? I mean, raise your hand if you're a South Carolina Gamecock. It's not, that's a joke. But, I mean, let's think about it on the global scale. I mean, there's very few friends that Putin has right now, right? I mean, Putin has been a polarizing figure on the world stage. He's not getting a lot of great press unless he's controlling it. And so, I mean, this is rising to the level of what we're talking about. This centurion would represent something so horrible that it's hard for us to understand. This supernaturally evil connotation, a symbol of earthly cruelty, right? That's evident everywhere. The Gestapo. It's a good example. Absolutely. In fact, Gentile soldiers were thought of among Jews as beasts, subhumans, or actual limbs of the devil. Right? You've heard the long arm of the law or the strong arm of the law. I mean, they are physical examples of the devil at work in that context. And so it would be like Jesus warmly commending the centurion for his faith would be like a survivor of Auschwitz patting someone who worked the camp on the back. Right? I mean, it's that kind of differentiation, I guess. Yes. Yeah. Sorry, yeah. I did the Luke. That was the Luke.
Let's see. I had it here a second ago. Yeah, he loved their nation, and he'd also helped build the synagogue.
That's right.
So he already had a pretty good reputation.
Right. Yep. So the centurion in the Luke text has built a little equity, right, in that community. Yep. What else occurred to you as you were talking around the table? Sorry about the Matthew 8, and then these are all the Luke connections. Sorry about that. Yes. I tried to utterly confuse you at every turn. I'm sorry. Yes, I was. So, we've got this this heart of Jesus coming through and responding to someone who has come on behalf of another. And Jesus approached individuals as individuals and not as what they carried around in society, right? He saw a person for a person and tried to differentiate between what their role in society might have been in lots of ways. The woman at the well, another good example, not necessarily a miracle story per se, but a way that someone of social status, very low, was met with forgiveness and was called to sin no more. And so the centurion kind of remains kind of a paradoxical figure in a lot of ways, but a reminder to us that there is no barrier that Jesus might put up if there is a need that is brought to his attention. Okay? So let's go to the healing of the man at Bethsaida. We will look for. I'm going the wrong way. Sorry. This is. Rest assured, this is John 5. Okay. Sorry about that earlier. I'll read the John 5 text, and we'll actually talk about the John 5 text. After this, there was a festival of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now, in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, there's a pool called, in Hebrew, Bethesda, which has 5 porticos. In these lay many invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who'd been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water stirred up, and while I'm making my way, somebody else steps down ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." Once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk. Now, that day was a Sabbath day. So, talk to me about the stirring up of the pool. Well, I'm taking one of the questions. What was that about? What mattered about the stirring of the pool? Right. They were talking about an angel stirring the waters, and that was a reminder or a signal that maybe the first person in was going to be healed. And so this is this story. So we've got this the reality that it's possible to visit this site. Who may have traveled over there and seen this site? Anybody been to that part of the world and seen this? No? Yeah? Doc, you've been? So it's possible to visit the site mentioned in this miracle near St. Anne's Church to the north of the temple area in Jerusalem. And the pool with 5 porticos that is described here was excavated, they think, in the 60s. And some Gospels, John's Gospel calls it several things. It's mentioned several ways. Bethesda, or probably Bethsaida. So There are manuscripts that point to several of those. And we're not told what the man's specific ailment was, but what are we told about it? Long time, right? Been laying there for a long time. 38 years is a long time. And so you've got this, he's got to not be able to walk, not be able to move very well because he's slow to the pool, even when the waters are troubled. And commentators have talked about this man for a long time, right? He gets a bad rap. He's lazy. He's not very smart, doesn't know how to position himself well so he can plunge in really quick. Dull. But he has been attempting the same feat fruitlessly for almost 4 decades. So something's going on here, right? And his failure to realize that Jesus has the power to heal might be one of the most glaring things. He doesn't say, heal me. What's he say? Carry me to the pool, right? So in the first story, we've got a Gentile who recognizes the power that Christ holds. In this story, maybe not necessarily straight off. Do we have a man who realizes Jesus' power to heal? And even after his healing, his failure to identify Christ until later in the story is evident as well. And so possibly this man's hopelessness might help explain Jesus' question, do you want to be made well? Now, several scholars have talked about the fact that there's a question like this at the beginning of a baptism that resonates here. But Jesus asks the man, do you want to be made well? And first time I ever tried to deal with this text, I thought this was pointing toward this guy who really, he's just laying by, feeling sorry for himself. Does he really want to be made well? And so that's part of the story here, certainly. But you've got this failure to realize that Jesus could do something for him that no one else could, right? And some commentators link, again, like I said, this miracle with baptism and relate Jesus' question with this liturgical command that opens many ancient liturgies of baptism. What do you want? Confess what you want, that you want to be cleansed, that you want to be a changed person, right? And so this is part of the story. Along similar lines, the 5 porticos, we got imagery here, numerology here, right? 5 porticos, what might they symbolize? This might be a little bit of a reach, but what might 5 porticos symbolize? That's a good guess, but think scripturally, the Pentateuch, right? Got the 5 first books of the Bible. And then other commentators speculate that this 38 years of sickness relates to the 38 years of fruitless wanderings by the Israelites in the desert, right? Who knows? These are speculatory, and you certainly you could make a case potentially that these connect. Even the angel. To the angels who meditated the law to Moses. So you've got a lot of imagery here. And at first sight, Jesus warns the man to sin no more in case something worse happens to you. And that seems to contradict some of the things that he's already taught, right? In John 9:3 and in Luke 13, that there is no link between sin and sickness. And clearly, sin and sickness are linked in the sense that both are symptoms of humanity, right, of fallenness. And so they're inextricably bound together. In fact, Jesus simultaneously forgives and heals the paralytic lowered through the roof. Both follow from the victory of Jesus over the power of evil through the faith that restores the man's relationship to God. And so both happen at the same time in that story. So Jesus' command to him at the end to stand up, take your mat, and walk is exactly the same as his command to the paralyzed man in the other story, in the synoptic story. And this emphasis isn't on Jesus' authority to forgive sins, but rather his authority to heal on Sabbath, right? Why else would that last sentence be there, right? The writer's making a point. This is a Sabbath day. And in particular, this is fuel for the fire that will come, right? This is more fuel for the fire that will come. And it resembles Mark's account in a lot of ways with the healing of the man with the withered hand, because that happens on the Sabbath as well. And in that story, directly after, the Pharisees and the Herodians are incensed, right? In fact, it says they start to conspire to get rid of him. And so in that story, that's a direct link to this march toward Jerusalem that Jesus is on in that story.
Now that's where the parable about the ox in the ditch comes into play.
Right, absolutely.
When he tells them, he says, when he tells them the phrase, the ox is in the ditch.
That's right. All right. It's a done deal, right? Yep. So we've got Jesus' view as represented by both in the Synoptic Gospels and in John, was that the Sabbath was a blessing and not a burden from God. Okay, so he's trying to reset expectation. That the Sabbath is not, I guess I take the stance that he's trying to disconnect all of the laws that were just holding people in bondage around keeping the Sabbath holy, that it was supposed to be a blessing and not a curse. Okay? And the conflict over Jesus' Sabbath healings in its sharpest form confuses the letter of law with the spirit and refuses to see in the sheer good of the healings that the authority of the healer himself supersedes the authority of the law, the letter of the law. And so Jesus has come. He is redefining, right, this existence for these people. In Mark, Jesus declares that the Son of Man is the Lord even of the Sabbath. So, let's talk quickly around the tables about this story. I think it's a good one and is a reminder for us for some things that I'll close us with in about. There's only 5 or 6 questions here, so let's give ourselves 4 or 5 minutes to walk through those. All right? All right, I'm going to try to land the plane here and get us out in the next 6 minutes. What was the conversation around the table like here? Did y'all talk about this lazy guy? Did you talk about the things that stood in the way? What were your impressions of the point of this miracle? Anybody got anything they want to add to the group? If you got healed, you would have to go to work. Uh-oh. Yeah.
Which did go to a part of the larger conversation, which is not, it wasn't a rhetorical question of Jesus. Not everybody who's sick wants to get well.
Right.
For any number of reasons.
Right.
So It's what sounds like an obvious question. Well, yeah, I want to get well. Isn't that obvious? There are a lot of people who choose their own limitations because they become comfortable in their limitations rather than do what's required to be well again.
And that's exactly where I was headed to close us. So much of sinfulness and the want to turn away starts in us, doesn't it? And even as folks who feel well adjusted and who feel like we're here for the right reasons and we want to do good, sometimes even our own willingness to do good can be a stumbling block for others, can it? So a lot of times, especially if you're someone who has dealt with addiction, or you've dealt with an unhealthy relationship with a family member who just walks around a pity party, right? You can see in them that they really just don't want to get well. They don't want to make changes. And the truth of all of that is, until it's our decision, we got no control over it. It's not the same, but I'll never forget, I wanted to be a different dad than my dad. I was not going to make the same mistakes he made. And one of the things he and I fought about all the time was schoolwork. And, why did I bring that 97 home? Where are those other 3 points? And so I was like, well, if a 97 is not good enough, I'll bring an 87 home. Let's see how that goes, right? So anyway, Charlie and I start tussling as he's a sophomore. And they have this app called Power School where you can log in and see every grade and every missed assignment. It was like crack for me. Like I would log in and I'll be like, Charlie, why didn't you turn in your homework? And all we did was fight about his homework in school. And I said I wasn't going to do that, and here I am. I deleted the Power School app. I realized, look, this is his to do. You've got a master's degree. Like, if he wants it, he'll do it. And if not, you need to clearly explain what life's going to be like. And so that's what Jennifer and I did. I just said, look, buddy, every resource is yours. If you want a tutor, all you have to do is say tutor, and we'll provide it. If whatever resources you need is yours, but it's yours to do. I've got a high school diploma. I've got a bachelor's degree. I've got a master's degree. I'm not going to do it again. It's up to you. But what you need to know is when you turn 18, you can't live with me and your mother. I just said, look, you need to have a plan, an exit strategy, because you're either going to college or you're going to join the armed service or you're going to get a job. And I'm excited about any of those 3 options for you, but it's yours to make. In the end, that's what I think this miracle can say to us, is exactly where Doc was and Doc's table was. That is, sometimes as Christians, we've got to make our own decision, right, to take up our mat and to partner with a God who wants the best for us, right, who wants us to fully participate, and even in our full participation, not to miss the main thing. Because sometimes, we carry our own agenda in, even when we're willing, and we plop it right down. We're like, this is where we're going, God. I'm ready to move. I want to participate, but unless it ends up here, I'm not really interested. Right? And that's not really the way God works, is it? So as we're thinking about all of the miracles of Christ, we don't want to embrace this shortcut to the same sickness of the will, which physical sickness might take 38 years to get us away from, right? We want to let go. It's trite, but we want to let go of all the things that we want to control, and we want to let God in the middle of it, right? We want to participate. Do we want to be made well? That's the question that I think is the most important in this story. And it's not just that, when I read this story, I'll be one of the guys standing out watching it, right? I'm not the guy laying by the pool, or am I? Right? And so that's my challenge for us this week. Think about where you are in that story. Are you lying by the pool? Do you want to be made well? Or are you watching it? Are you trying to encourage? Are you standing in the way? Where are we? So thank you all very much for your attention and for the time. And I hope you have a great rest of the week. Stay warm. It's about to get cold.